You're listening to the She Lift Project podcast, a show dedicated to helping women achieve higher levels of success in the workplace. No matter where you are in your career, we want to help you grow. Now here's your host, Cynthia Kirkpatrick, a CPA, CFP, and Senior Financial Advisor at Moneta Group.
Welcome to another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. I'm Cynthia Kirkpatrick. Thanks for joining us today, which I'm sure will be amazing. We've already talked about so much to fit in an hour. It's Shannon Shores. You have so many things going on, but let's just say leader, entrepreneur, and kind-hearted badass.
Yes.
And thanks for joining me today, and we'll get into all the different hats and things, I'm sure, along the way. How we met, I saw a post you did on LinkedIn, and it was you in this sweatshirt. I wrote down it was like a text. You'd captured almost the picture of a text. Mm-hmm. And one said, "You're too much. You are too much." And then the response text was, "Go find less."
Yes.
And I thought, I have to meet this woman. I hope she doesn't think it's weird that I'm just going to reach out randomly and say, stick with me here, but I love what you posted and I want to know more, and I would love to share you with people out there.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me on this podcast. We do have a lot to cover, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with other women their inner strength, right? And I think that sweatshirt was great. So I have a friend who has a line, 808 unapologetic, and that shirt was more for women who are dating, right? And it was like a text message. If you took a screenshot of a phone, it said, "You're too much, go find less." And I said to her, oh my gosh, I have to have that sweatshirt because this is how I feel. And I haven't always felt that way when someone said, "You're too much." How many times did I want to wither? How many times did I say, oh gosh, what can I do to be less or to please you? And I can tell you now, I'm that woman who's going to say, go find less.
And it's that building that confidence, that self-assuredness, that belief in yourself, that it's okay to advocate, set boundaries, and you're not the bad person for doing it.
No, you can be unapologetic and be like, this is who I am. This is who I represent. This is, the personality I bring, or the attitude, or the colorful language sometimes I may drop. I apologize now. But it's really being your true self. And that's hard for a lot of us women to find who we are without feeling like we have to say, I'm sorry, or to reframe it, that we can be who we are meant to be, by just getting out of our own darn way.
Okay, so see why I said that this is going to be so much amazing content. How can we probably fit it in an hour? So sit tight, hold on, you're going to learn a lot. And I think this would be a great place to say, if you like what you're going to hear today, want to listen to other episodes, know people who would be interested, make sure you share the podcast, subscribe, follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. So let's jump in, because I imagine we may take different turns on this podcast. I imagine this isn't the Shannon from 10 years old. Probably not even, and I don't want to age you, but let's say early on in your career, 20 something.
Yeah. Not
you. How did you get to this mindset where you're at today?
Yeah, and that's great because, yes, the young Shannon was a girl who was awkward and nerdy, and I say that with all affection for my fellow nerds out there.
I'm one.
Yes, awkward and nerdy, and had a hard time fitting in. I felt like my voice, that I had to be quiet, and in growing up, I had to find my true self and my voice. And that came through several turns. 5 years ago, I was in an anthology called Hear Her Now. And I had gone through a lot of, maybe some tragedies in my life. I had gone through loss. I've gone through sadness. And I'd actually, at just that point, I had gone on no contact with someone who was very close to me and my family. And no contact is someone, when you decide that relationship is too toxic, that you decide to quit having the conversation, right? Quit having that relationship, which is hard. It's hard because you have to mourn that. But that person has changed so much. So when I wrote that anthology in that chapter, when I started that chapter, I introduced myself as the conductor of the Hot Mess Express, right? The mom who's coming into the school laying on two wheels, taking her sleeve and wiping her kid's nose, right? I was trying to do so much, right? Because sometimes in that growing up, that young Shannon became an overachiever because she was a people pleaser. She needed to please others. And so that really developed in my adulthood as well. But so that conductor of the Hot Mess Express, she was a younger mom, right? I'd say about 5 years ago. And what I talked about in that chapter was so real for me at that time. I talked about how as a young girl, I was scared of the monsters underneath my bed. I would literally come running into my bedroom at night and maybe like 3 feet from my bed, jumping into my twin-size bed and covering my head because I was so fearful of the monsters under my bed. But guess what, Cynthia? As I grew up, I was still scared of those darn monsters underneath my bed. Messages from childhood. Relationships I had lost. People who had disappointed me, or I felt I disappointed them, right? And I really had to come face to face with those monsters. And I talk in that chapter of how I did that. When I would get to a place where a situation would come up, a tragedy, a crisis, because growing up, that's when I got the most attention, is when crisis happened. And what I learned was that was not a behavior that was really a healthy behavior, that it had to be crisis. Something bad had to happen. It's like, how do we celebrate the wins? But coming out of those monsters, and those monsters, I was pulling them out of the bed, right? I would look at them one by one, face them, and then I would fold them up neatly, right? And I would put them in my suitcase. I called it my emotional suitcase because in that time, I would look at those, I would face it what it is, and I would just go, lesson learned, here's what I'm gonna do differently, and I would move on. It was great. And working with a mental health provider, she said, that's really awesome. I love how you're using your coping skills we've talked about. But let me challenge you here, Shannon. What happens if one day you kick over that suitcase and all of those things come flying out, right? What are you going to do? And it was like, bam, right? That I could no longer just say, lesson learned, what am I going to do different? And move on. I had to decide in that emotional suitcase, I was no longer going to be a victim of my story any longer. That I was going to take these opportunities not only to learn from them, but empower other women, other people around me, be thankful for the people who were in my tribe, because there were some really lonely times where I felt like I had no one and no voice. And it took someone to pick me up along the way and say, you're good enough. You're good enough. And I can tell you, I still struggle at times with imposter syndrome. Like even, I'll be honest, last week when I thought about this podcast and I got the reminder, I thought, what does Cynthia want to gain from interviewing me? And that was a real thought last week. And I get chills just thinking about it because it still sneaks up and it still comes out sometimes. But even today, as I had my music blaring on the way in here to see you, I thought, if no less that I can do today on this podcast is to say to a woman who feels like she's not good enough, she's scared of those monsters on her bed, girl, we can move mountains by having the right people around us, choosing positive versus negative energy, and putting right foot in front of the left foot, and you just keep moving.
Oh, where do we go from there? I've written a bunch of notes on how do we unpack that, and there's so much great stuff in that. So see, this is why I knew she's got to be on. She's got to share experience, wisdom. Anyway, there's so many places I can go. What I'm interested in, though, thinking back to little Shannon, you said little Shannon needed to be quiet, had to be quiet, had to people please. Why is that, do you think?
Yeah.
Why do so many of us start out, maybe we don't start out that way, but from an early adolescent, tween years, why do we get stuck in that space?
Well, we discussed this over breakfast, right, when we met, about, I'm going to call it kind of that 40-something women, right? There's so many women who are in their 40-somethings, which is me, that grew up in the 70s. Most of us did. I mean, you can kind of, that 70s, 80s, but growing up in the 70s, a lot of our family dynamics were different then, right? Prior to that, families stayed together through thick and thin. There was a lot of abuse at times. It could be, maybe the husband was away, mom was at home. Really, I feel like these 40-somethings were a change in family dynamics. This is where you saw more in the 70s that divorce was happening, right? Women were going to work and things were changing. I'm going to be the first to say is that I don't want to blame my upbringing, but I can point to it. I can point to things in my upbringing that made little Shannon feel that way. There was addiction in my family. There were narcissistic behaviors that came from wanting to blame at times, not feeling a place of safety to have open communication. Mm-hmm. Like I said, attention came when there was trauma. And even though I can point to those things and I adapted my own coping skills to that, if I could only make mom happy, I had a single mother. And I will say to you that even though her and I no longer have a relationship, I will forever be grateful for the woman that she was and she is when it came to teaching me you always work hard. You work hard for what you want. But what happened in that is because of other things surrounding that, what little Shannon was, how can I make everyone's life easier? So living paycheck to paycheck as a kid, I thought to myself, how can I find some extra money so we have more money for groceries? That's something that I chose to do as a child. And it does show up now, is that I went from people-pleasing, little Shannon to people-pleasing young adult Shannon to, at times, I can find myself falling into that trap because I was a fixer. I had my own relationship issues with men, from teenage to, my 20s and 30s. And what it came to, I was a fixer. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to fix the addiction in my family. I wanted to fix the living paycheck to paycheck. I wanted to alleviate the stress in my mother's life. I wanted to make sure my little sister had everything she needed. I. No one made me do that. That's just how I grew up to be with those elements in my life. And they did transpire into, I would say that I'm no longer quiet. It helped me be who I am, but I had to take those elements and through therapy and coping skills, take them from something that used to weigh me down to something that empowered me. So I'll never blame it, but what I will say is that I chose with those elements in my childhood not to be the victim in that story, not to blame my family because they're going through their own trauma. This is the 70s. Addiction's happening. There's less treatment for mental health. We're not looking at dual diagnosis. Marriages are falling apart. There were more single parents. There were so many things I can't blame, but what I can do is make boundaries around what I need now and figure out who I am and what I'm willing to do and not what I'm willing to do.
Wow, you're speaking to me. You're speaking to me. And I think so much is true in that is, we look at it from the 2020s, what we know today, both as an adult, but in society with all of the, thinking that's out there now about mental health and boundaries and not being a people pleaser, et cetera. And to go back 40 years and say, well, why was my life like that back then? Because most people didn't know better. They did the best they could with what they knew or what was available at the time. Not everyone, but I think for the most part, if we put our 40-something 2024 hats on and judge based on that, then yes, you could get in that cycle of victimhood, angry, blame, which, is just going to keep you in that emotional suitcase until it blows up.
Yeah.
And I loved how you described the emotional suitcase because I think growing up, I don't know if you got this too, emotions were, fine, but don't think that way. Don't feel that way. Just get over it. Be tough versus now what we're hearing is emotions are what they are, work through them, address them, learn from them. What do you do with them? But don't keep pushing and shoving them down until one day they explode like those snakes in that can where that pop just comes, the top comes off, it pops and everything comes out.
Yeah, right. We do that in relationships with our marriage, right? I always say, it's the situation where, something happens, you don't address it, and then a week later you trip over the shoes and you've lost it. And everyone's like, why are you so mad? It's that same kind of thing. Well, because you never resolved what it was a week ago when you were, mad. And I think that's the thing you have to remind people is that the first step is resolving what's in the past. And I don't mean you have to lay on the couch, no offense, but to the laying on the couch therapy, but it doesn't mean you have to go back and lay on the couch and go through every painstaking moment. Because I think that's what keeps people from therapy sometimes is, I don't want to go through all of that. Well, don't go through all of that, but recognize though, what are those elements in your childhood that are still riding with you? Mm-hmm. They're still on your back, if you want to admit it or not, but that's where they came from. And until you can go, that's why I act that way. That's why I responded that way. Okay. Again, not being in the victim, but taking it from a position of strength of change.
You're kind of like, A pluses, no mistakes were rewarded back then. So, and, you think about it in school, the red pen and the grading and the whatever, that leads potentially to that perfectionism. I won't do anything that I'm afraid I might mess up, that I'm not perfect in. So often women don't put their hand up to say, you know what, I have 60% of what this job description is. I'm throwing my, name in the hat. As you said, don't go back and stew in that and live in that and not work through it. Yet, if you don't acknowledge or understand it, you may not be able to break through. I almost see it like a tether. There's something that's still tethered from your childhood, the past, and you need to understand it and cut it off so that you can move forward.
One of my very dear friends, she started talking to me, and when we'd had these discussions, right, about moving forward in empowerment, she'd often say, well, what does little Shannon say about that? And I thought when she said that was the dumbest thing I ever heard, sitting at my 40s talking about little Shannon. But back at what we're talking about is so true, is that little Shannon needs some love and needs some, she needs to grow in that and to know it was okay. It was okay that maybe she didn't use her voice as much, right? She was scared. She recognized that thing which you just talked about, perfectionism. That was so real for little Shannon, is because she did not want to make mistakes. She did not want to rock the boat. She wanted everything to be just perfect, right? Because when everything's perfect, everyone's happy. And I have to give her credit that I didn't give up on her and she didn't give up on adult me. That together we knew we would grow up to be something, but we had to go through those steps and we had to learn who we are. And we need to tell other women that it's okay to be stuck in your little self, but recognize what your little self really learned and what your little self is trying to tell your adult self now. Because man, if we can connect it, be lights out.
Wow. It's so true. You can almost envision, right, the little one inside of you. Yeah. And just that it's okay, you're safe, you did great. Now we've got more greatness to accomplish together. Let's go.
Let's do this.
So you talked about your first anthology. How does Shannon get to where Shannon is today? Was there a trigger point? How did this evolve?
Yeah. Well, so now the new anthology is coming out. I think it'll be out by the end of the year or first of next, Living Well. And really this Shannon is talking about making this full, kind of just coming full circle, right? Recognizing what little Shannon contributed to this chapter and how adult Shannon is kind of meeting her in the middle and going, we got this, girl. And inspiring other people to find their inner self. So, for example, at the beginning of the year, I can have a little bit of colorful language. I like to use it. It puts a little pep in my step. It's just me. And actually, I was at a business meeting the other day and someone dropped the F-bomb and she goes, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. That was so unprofessional. I go, And I just stopped and stared at her, and she goes, what? And I go, no, I think we're soul sisters, right? But so I purchased this calendar, and it was like this empowerment calendar. And January said, manifest this shit. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? Because as I was thinking about living well, I sold a business in 2020, right? I purchased a business. I, ran the business for 5 years. I had a lot of great people help me grow that business year after year. I had a really great business mentor that would often remind me, Shannon, do you want to be the cat or do you want to be the mouse? And I decided I wanted to be the cat. And as the cat, I surrounded myself with other badass businesswomen who, it was great because I respected them at such a high level that I thought they had all the answers, right? And we'd sit around the round table to discuss like a business issue. And it was interesting. Guess what? They didn't know all the answers. And what we did is we learned from each other because we came at a place of just level setting of, we want to grow our business. We want to do well by our investors, our employees, our customers. How can we kind of bring this energy together? And it was amazing. So grew that business year after year. And year 5, I decided that I wanted to do something else. I thought, you know what? My kids were still relatively young. And I thought, I'm going to travel. I'm going to level set, figure out what the next chapter looks like. But we all know what happened in 2020. COVID happened. So I sell my business with this big dreams, and they said, guess what? Here's your present. Now you can stay home and homeschool your children. Yikes, right? Because I'm thinking, I'm not a teacher. And I knew I had to do something different when I told my son, and we were doing math. Okay, we were doing math together. And this Common Core stuff, I was like, no. In this house, we carry the one, We carry the one in this house. And during that, I had said to my sons, we were trying to do math. And I said, if you don't get it together, you're going to grow up and be a janitor. And then I said, no, forget that. Janitors have really great work ethic. You can't even be a janitor. And I knew at that point, like, okay, I'm really sucking here at being a mom, being a teacher, being a recovering entrepreneur. I got to do something different. And so I decided after that, I was like, I have to get a job and I need to put these kids in private school because they're still going back to school because all the public schools that they'd been going to, of course, was doing at home. And so with that plan, away I go to back to work. But I had to be an employee versus the employer, right? Which was fine. Because I said to myself, I don't want to always I'm tired of being the pilot. I was the pilot of the plane for the past 5 years. And I love that. I liked being, energetic, creative, growing the team. But there's a lot of risk in being a business owner, right? But I loved that. I had a great tribe, as I said. But I was wanting to kind of sit back, maybe back and, into be the crew and not the pilot. So, I didn't have to worry about those, filing taxes, all the things business owners do. But I wanted to still be that creative person, that problem solver. But what I noticed as I went from, being a boss, right, to an employee is that I was coming in, a lot of times I kept falling into like business developing, growing business, right? And I would still come with that same passion and energy. But what they would say often was, yes, we love that. We love that passion. We love that energy. We love that you owned your own business because you know both sides of it, right? How to grow it. You also know the just anxiety of the losses. So we love that. So when I came in and I had a couple episodes like this where people would go, oh, we like that energy, but not that much. We like that idea, but that's a little bit too much. And what I had to come to tell these folks is you hired me to grow a business. And what you're hearing me say is that your baby's ugly. And what I'm not saying is that your baby is ugly, but your baby needs help, right? Because I was finding myself in businesses that, were original owners, and they were very proud of the business. And I thought we would align a whole lot better because I had that experience. But it didn't work out for the fact of I wanted more. I wanted to be a part of the conversation, right? I like to be challenged. I'm not saying that I had to be my way or no way. What I'm saying is that sometimes we go in, especially as women, and I will say these were male-dominated environments, that you come in, you're strong, you're willing to be challenged, you're willing to take feedback, but also give feedback. And sometimes that is not welcomed. And I want to say here today is that that's okay. It's okay to manifest what you need, is to go, that's just not my fit. It's nothing against that employer, and it's nothing against the employee. We came, because an interview, right, is, as I see, the beginning dating stage. Tell me all the good things about you. I'll tell you all the good things about me. But then when you really start dating, and then when you get married, and then you find out the habits, right? When those come out, you realize, okay, you decide, is this really for me or not? And so I had those kind of blips, in my career. And it's interesting to me, and working through employment, as people go, make sure your resume doesn't have too many gaps. Make sure your resume doesn't have too many switches. Stay as long as you can, because you don't want to be less. What kind of crap is that? Why? Why would you stay somewhere that's unhealthy? Why would you stay somewhere that's not a good fit? Because you're also doing that employer a service too, because it's not going to work out. Are you going to change and mold? Great. But if not, if this is not who you are, why not stand up and both my blips, had very honest conversations with the ownership to say, this is what you want. This is what I'm giving. And for some reason, we thought about this, maybe a year ago, and we thought that's what it was going to look like. But now when we kind of put that together, it's not a great fit. And I think we can maybe go into other places where now exactly what you're looking for, and so do I. So those are just learning lessons that I learned along the way. And so fast forwarding to January is when I received this calendar. I was doing, something that I liked. It was growth. It was working remote as well, which I realized something about me is I need people around me. Not all the time. I don't be over people. Don't get me wrong. But I like people. They energize me. I have a lot of creativity. And I saw a presentation in January where this presenter was talking about, what's the story you tell yourself when you get out of bed in the morning, right? And for me, the story always is I try to think about the positive things. Even driving over here to Clayton, I could be like, oh God, driving to Clayton, I'd rather do anything, than drive to Clayton, try to find your parking garage, those sort of things, versus I'm gonna leave a little extra early. I'm going to jam my music and have a good time. But how many times, though, do we tell ourselves when we wake up in the morning how much our day is going to suck? And it is, if you tell yourself that. So I remember telling back to the group I was working with about how I thought that was so impactful, and how we could all take maybe that chapter out of that book and decide, how do we go more positive? And I think it was received as a little bit more, oh, that sounds like cheesy things, cheesy stuff. And to me, I was like, whoa, this is really strong to who I am. And so I decided in January, just buy some calendar I saw in the mall for $15.99. And that interaction of that speaker in Florida that day who said, what's the story that you tell yourself? I thought, this is not good for me. This is a little bit draining because it doesn't have the positive energy. Nothing against them, but I know what I need. And so I gave a 3-month notice, because it wasn't something that, that was something that was urgent, but I knew I didn't want to do long term, right? I gave a 3-month notice, and then I had to piece together. I thought to myself, Shannon, what do you want to do? And I told myself, because my personality, description says that Shannon is energetic, go figure.
Yeah, surprising.
High energy, fast talker, fast thinker, and strangers are only friends that Shannon hasn't met yet, right? And so I knew that I wanted to be somewhere that I could help people. I really felt like I could make a change. And so, funny enough, in that 3 months, I took on a contract position working with individuals with developmental disabilities with medication adherence, which I love. Kind of goes back into my social work background, because I graduated with master's in social work. And then I had a meeting with a guy end of last year. We were talking about a business item, and he said to me, you know what I need, Shannon? I need someone like you to come work for me. I need someone to grow my business and really, take it to a new place. And I looked at him and I said, you don't want me. And he goes, well, why? I go, because I'm expensive and I'm bossy. And it was just like, he laughed and I laughed, but I was like, but I'm serious. Right?
That takes a lot. I mean, how many people would just say that, but good for you.
But I want him to know, if you really want to have a conversation with me, getting me to come work with you has a cost, right? Like, I have a lot of talent. I've learned from some of the best business women in St. Louis. I've had the best business mentors. It's not from what I learned in school. I didn't go to business school. I learned from the most amazing women here in St. Louis. And I bring that talent wherever I go because it's something that, I learned here or did that or what worked for her. I'm like, let's give it a try. Because I love to try things out. We could always pivot. I think we learned that great in COVID, right? And so after January, and I was going to manifest that, I gave him a call. And I said, how serious were you? And he goes, wow, would you take a meeting with me? I said, remember, I will take a meeting with you because I'm curious of what you want. But remember 2 things before you agree to this. I'm expensive and I'm boss. And he's like, when do we set it up? And so manifesting is really of just living well of who I am today. And little Shannon wouldn't have definitely said something like that. Shannon in her 20s wouldn't have said something like that. Shannon in her 30s would have maybe started speaking up, like, yeah. But Shannon now at 46 years old, I don't have time. I know that I have a skill set that's not for everyone. I know of a personality that's not for everyone. But man, oh man, when I have the right combination, we could all be dynamite in a good way.
Wow, this goes back to even some of the conversation we were having before we hit record, that some people, and you mentioned already that some people will see resume changes as a negative. However, all those things you said, it may not be the right culture or fit, which is fine.
Yeah.
One is not bad because it didn't fit. So if you're thinking about leaving because of a toxic culture, a culture that, I shouldn't say toxic, let's just say it's a culture that's out of alignment. Yeah. The values are out of alignment with what you are good at and value. It's okay. You're not a failure. It's not a failure. Sometimes you may be forced to leave a job, and it doesn't mean failure. Means it wasn't a good fit. And as you mentioned, you've learned from so many different amazing leaders that have led in jobs and in industries, and you have a master's in social work, but you're not doing, you're doing different things, that it's not staying in one place. That's a positive of learning, switching. And now you can bring so much more to the table and be confident about it.
Yes.
In your 40s versus, 20s or little Shannon, Cynthia, thinking I'm not ready for that.
Yeah. Well, in the job that it's so interesting that I'm having so much fun. So when I met with Greg at Premier U, that's where I am right now, part-time, because I have, the part-time gig. I have a contract thing for, medication adherence. And then when I talk with you about my new great idea here in a minute of Bernie May Consulting, because it's finally taking my daydream I've had for a long time and putting it together. But it was so interesting, though, of why I joined Premier U after we had that meeting, because we met and it was, I want you to help grow the business. But when it really got down to the business, what resonated with me is that Premier U does female hormones, male hormones, and weight loss. So as I sit here today at 46, I've lost 25 pounds, but I've lost 25 pounds 4 times in my entire life, right? Like, I'm not celebrating that, but what I'm celebrating is the fact that at 46 now, these 25 pounds, I've done it over the past year, right? I'm more mindful. I'm more mindful of triggers, stress, how I treat my body, what my body needs. We've been talking about what my brain needs or what my heart needs, but what about what our body needs? And the other thing with female hormones, I'm loving, because at 44, I was going to my son's choir event, and I walk in, and all of a sudden it felt like I walked through the Sahara Desert, like my hair, when it gets like wet underneath here, right?
Yes.
First. And I just felt gross. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have like no makeup on. It looked like a hot mess. And I went to my doctor and I said to her, what is this? What's going on? And she said, well, it sounds like you're going through perimenopause. Who the heck's Peri? Where did he come from, right? And perimenopause, and you could do this for the next 10 years. Good luck, high five. And so when I started seeing a provider in a more private space like Premier U, when you realize like there are solutions out there for women, I've been having so much fun. I've been on Channel 2 recently and Channel 4 recently talking about hormones of like, this is not your grandma's menopause, ladies. We don't have to suffer. Just like we're talking about at work, with our hearts. Like I said, it's our bodies. Why do we also feel like we have to be Wonder Woman all the time? Because we could tell ourselves, society tells us all the time, you're just feeling that way because you're stressed. Just take a walk, drink a glass of wine, it's a career, you're just working too hard. Well, we could be. But when someone actually stops to figure out what's going on with us, it's like a trifecta of health. We have to remember that too. And so I'm having so much fun. And I remind the group there all the time, hey, if I'm pushing too hard, please let me know. And what I'm loving is that they were so receptive to that. So we're building some amazing things for women and men because they have hormones too. But I just love this empowerment piece because it's kind of bringing, again, full circle back of everything that we're doing.
And you're right. Women for so long instill that Wonder Woman, she-woman kind of thing. We have to be all to everyone, have it all, and don't look flustered or sweaty at all.
Yeah.
Along the way.
Yeah.
And so much of I would say so much of our bodies and what we go through, it was always, shh.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about it. Because that's things that we don't talk about. Mm-hmm. And having two young girls and even a son to say, like, there's no shame. This is what my body does. And by the way, I need more people to study it and talk about it and share it. So when these things start happening, I don't feel like I'm some crazy lunatic, or I'm not made to feel like I'm some crazy lunatic because I'm like, something's weird here. I'm cold, but my armpits are sweating. What's up with that? What is wrong?
I always say like not only with that, but like memory fog, right? I can still today recite every word to Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice, but I can tell you when I go into the parking garage in a minute, I'm going to forget like where the heck I parked, or looking for my glasses where they're on the top of my head, or the keys in my hand. And it's not just your stress. It's like, again, we do go through some memory fog as women, but we're just told, hey, this is what you do. But yeah, we might have too many tabs open in our head. Guilty is charged, but it's the silly things of what our body does as we age.
And I'm going to do my darndest not to ask you to right here and now recite everything to Ice Ice Baby, as I'm sure people
stop, collaborate, and listen.
I know the hot buttons. I don't know all of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's iconic, right? Vanilla Ice. Oh my gosh. You're doing, as you talked about, Birdie May Consulting, which I know a little bit more about, but share how you're stepping into that, what it means, and what you hope to do with that.
Yeah. So this is something I've been talking about for years. So when I would get around those amazing ladies and they'd say, what's next for you, Shannon? You had a business, you've been working for other people, you haven't found that group that really resonates or gets you, right? What's next? And I would talk about wanting to put together coaching, consulting for women who don't feel like they're good enough, who might be stuck in their own struggles, getting their own way, but it would just be a conversation. Next time they would see me again, what's next for you? I would talk about this idea. Well, in January, when I said, I'm manifesting this, I knew that it was coming this year, and I was making it happen. And I wasn't going to put a lot of pressure on myself. It didn't have to look exactly like this, or I had to have these learning objectives, or because we do that, right? We overcomplicate everything in our lives versus going one step at a time, right, left, that's it. So I took the right step forward, and I decided, what do I want to name it? I'm going to have a name. Let me name it first, and then I'll put this together. And immediately, Birdie May came to be. So Birdie is after my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Alberta. Actually, she was Emma Alberta, and they always called her Birdie. And then Lena May, who passed away about 4 months ago. She is the May. So when you look at my logo, Birdie May Consulting, and there's 2 little red birds in the middle of that. One, because birds for a couple of things. One, even though my grandmother was Bertie, I always thought it was Birdie, like a little tweet tweet bird, because she was a tiny little gal who had to sit on a phone book to see over the top of her windshield, as she was taking me to the bingo hall where the people would just smoke and I'd eat Slim Jims and drink cherry Coke. Love that memory. And so really the bird's there, but also too is my grandma, Lena May. She loved the color red, so I'm channeling Lena May today. So the birds are red. A couple other things about birds is that how do we fly if we're constantly weighed down by things? So the birds also represent wanting to fly, and we have to unburden ourselves, as we talked about early in this podcast, right? Early in this conversation of like, how many things are we still carrying on that we're not recognizing are weighing us down? Childhood, again, tragedy, whatever it might be, what do we have to let go so we can fly? Because there's a scene in Forrest Gump where Jenny, she says, "Dear God, make me a bird so I can fly far, far away." That's my best Southern accent.
Very good accent.
Was that good? Yeah, thank you. And there's many times little Shannon thought that as well. It's like when times got tough, if there was too much tension, I just wanted to get away from it and just want everything to be okay, back to being perfect. And so those birds mean so many things to me. And when I first showed the logo, people are like, "Why birds?" And then once I tell people why birds, they're like, "Oh, wow." They can resonate with those birds. But really what Birdie May is, it's a tribute to 2 amazing women who marched in their own journey in their own way. Lena May would always say, you get up, you dress up, you show up. And if you're dressed on a bargain, that's even better, right? She always looked good. She was always high fashion, but she always pushed me to do more, more, more. And I took that as a challenge because I knew she was someone who raised children and had, she had several jobs because she was someone in earlier years that she did get divorced before divorce was something that happened, right? And she, God bless her, but even when she was dying, she was in hospice and she was dying and she was with us, but no longer really with us anymore. We were telling stories and asking other questions like, "Hey, who or how did, what?" And I could just tell she was thinking to herself, she was laying there thinking, "Dear God, just please take me now. They're getting all the family trash out," And she got to go to heaven with lots of her own secrets. But the thing was, it didn't affect who she was because she knew who she was and she kept going forward. So I'm going to take that legacy of those 2 grandmothers and I'm going to help other women. So the women I want to help, women who are in transition. And transition could be anything. It could be women who had that really amazing job and then they got married and then they had children and they stayed home. How many women I talk to who are trying to go back into the workforce that think they have nothing to give because they raise kids? Hello, you have more skills than you learned in a corporate environment about multitasking, problem solving. You've been the project manager of your household come on now.
You manage a calendar, you do the budgeting, you're the creative marketer
You're everything. You're the lawyer with the disputes in the house, right? You're the everything that's happening there, but we decide that we're less than. We're not enough, right? So I want to help women who are transitioning through if, they're leaving jobs, right? Because even corporate women who something happens, you get laid off, maybe the personality difference and you get let go. How do we see things as opportunities versus that is something that's being held against us, that we're not good enough? Mm-hmm. I just want to help people. I want to help women find their beast mode. And that's really kind of like my tagline is that beast mode is in my DNA. That's Birdie and Lena May together. That's my DNA, and that's where the beast mode lies. I've learned so much from those women, and I want to help women find their own beast mode and get out of their own way. They see whatever that success is, let them define what success is. Quit letting society tell you what success is for a woman. What is your success? What are your struggles getting there? And, I want to help those women pull those obstacles out of the way so they can be the best version of themselves.
And I feel like beast mode, it's not, people talk about women's evolution in business over time, how, oh, that's just, you'll come across it in your career where a woman holds you back, or that's just mean girl stuff. Or so beast mode, and correct me if I'm wrong, is none of that. It's finding what lights you up, who you are as a person at the core, and building the self-awareness, the knowledge, the confidence. You're worthy enough to say, I'm going to go out, get what I want, where that fits the right situation, and I'm not going to stop until I get that. And if this lane doesn't work, fine, I'm not a failure. I'm smart, actually, to move on.
Yep.
Like finding that your skill and your power and your zone of genius and saying, and I'm going to own it, and I'm not going to back down for anything.
Yeah, or anyone. You find your own version of saying, looking someone in the eyes and goes, I'm bossy and expensive, right? You find your own version of that, and you're unapologetic about it, for sure.
Right. Going back to some of that early sweatshirt thing, being unapologetic, because women often, I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize for whichever. And again, I think that just chips away at the confidence and the beast inside of you, to eventually you become this curled up, potentially little, I don't want to stereotype any kind of animals, but something that's smaller and not owning themselves.
And knowing what you want to surround yourself in. Like when you talk about kind of those workplace environments, is not letting that negativity, because there are people you're going to work with negativity. My always, when someone comes to me with a problem, or so-and-so's doing that, or this is not working. Well, how do we fix it? Have you ever fixed it? Have you ever thought about fixing it? Oh, okay. Have you thought about fixing it? How would you fix it? Oh, great. Because they might have an idea that you didn't. But I always like to put it back of like, how do we change this script from it's never going to work, this person's always this way. That's my Eeyore impression. I've done a Southern one, and now that's Eeyore. But, and flipping that back to, right, of, wow, you could be the element of change here. Like, how could we change it? Or if you don't know, what do you bring to that? It's because I think negativity is so it's just around all of us. Whatever. We turn the TV on, turn the radio on. How can we be that change and keep driving forward? I have this, actually, at my desk, I have a big sticker, and it says, only you can prevent drama. And it looks like, it's a llama drama, and it's got like a little hat on, like Smokey the Bear, right? But it just reminds you of, like, again, we don't have to get stuck in places we don't want to be. Like you said, toxic, unhealthy, maybe not a good fit. We can take ourselves right out. But you have to have the confidence. And if there's things weighing you down, that's the disconnect between confidence and where you want to be. You have to unload some of this baggage, and sometimes you don't know. So find a tribe, get a business mentor, talk with someone, because your greatness is right there. But sometimes you get that stuff on your back that's holding you back from being your true self.
And it's okay. We all need help.
Yeah.
You can only go so far alone. You'll go much further with that help. And as you said, the tribe of people like, Shannon, what's next? We know you're not done. We know you can do this. You're great here. We can't wait. Surround yourself with those people and be one of them, where you're sending out the positivity. And, maybe it's a quick text of, oh my gosh, I saw this today and I thought of you because you're just killing it in this area. So how can negativity's easy. That's just the easy path. And humans, that's where for survival mode for so long, like, you had to be aware and think everything was a threat. And so how do we build the habits to where the positive becomes the more natural way of being, whether, as you said earlier in the morning, what are you telling yourself about that day? You can go negative, but I loved your piece there of asking the questions, being curious of, great, how do we turn this around?
Yes.
Because we can live in that all day long. Nothing will change. It will get worse. How do we move? How do we turn this whole thing around?
Yeah, you got to find your natural leader in you. And that's how leaders start to shine, and we all can be leaders and be part of something bigger, and where we want to be, right? Because you can change that. We have the elements.
And it's about that curiosity. I find it fun as a parent, you're like just asking the questions. Well, what do you think your punishment should be? Or what do you think I want to talk to you about? And just see what they come up with. But actually in a positive way, as you said, and I was listening, we're going to release a podcast the day after we record these. And she had shared things like, she used to manage the events for her team. And she was taking on too much as a leader, so needed to delegate. And as soon as she delegated, the people on her team actually started doing events that they wanted to do, because again, you ask those questions, you let somebody else solve it and get it, versus being that leader who has to have, we can't know it all, we can't have it all ever. And it's exhausting putting that mask on every day.
Yeah, it's training the people around you to help you with that message, that corporate brand, wherever you are in your life right now listening to this, is that who can you help bring to help you build what you want to build in your life, in your marriage, in your career, with your children. We have to have those sources around us. And even small things, as you said, like last week there was a gal at work who was, someone's on vacation, so she was wearing 3 or 4 hats, right? And I just found a cute little sticker that said, "You're more capable than you think," right? It was like 98 cents. That 98 cents, she's like, she didn't know it was 98 cents, but that sticker meant so much to her. She's like, I needed that in the moment, because she was starting to doubt herself. Just like I said earlier, I started to doubt myself last week thinking about this podcast. How many times does that imposter syndrome get us? She was more than capable of wearing all those hats, but in that moment, she got scared that maybe she couldn't do that. But man, that little 98-cent sticker reminded her of like, not only do you know you're capable, find that again, and just know all of us around you know you're capable as well. You're going to kill it. And if you start to struggle, we're here because we know you can do this.
That really, it seems like you're getting, finding your spot of all you've learned from different jobs, careers, lanes in life, to then helping people, especially women. When we were preparing for this podcast, this is how I knew I had no concern. Well, one of the many reasons I had no concerns about this was some of the things you wrote. You've spent 46 years to discover happiness.
Yeah.
That word, happiness or joy, what that is, and then helping others find it. But really, at the end of the day, it's not external. It's all about what's inside the heart, inside the mind, and probably more, as you found over the last 46 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I wrote about this in the very first anthology, but my very first pregnancy, I was pregnant, and I started in my second trimester, went to the doctor, and they're supposed to do get the heart sound, and they're doing the heart, and the technician can't find the heart, and she basically like taps my leg and says the doctor will be in. They go in, they do another test, and then he taps me on the leg. I don't know why we think tapping on the leg is so like comforting, but taps me on the leg and says, your baby has died. You need to go home, and in the next, probably 2 to 3 days, nature will take its course. And let me tell you, that was the most horrific thing, horrific thing. After that, I went into a deep depression, right? Just because it was something that I wasn't prepared for, right? My emotional suitcase was not prepared for that one. Little Shannon did not prepare me for that one. That was something that I just thought, oh, I get pregnant, I have a baby, right? Like, remember, I see it, next step, go. I wasn't expecting this. And so I went into a depression, and I write about in the book where I wasn't actively suicidal, but I was at a point of depression that if I would close my eyes and fall asleep and didn't wake up, I felt like I'd be better off, because I just couldn't. And I was functioning depressed. I would go to work, like my grandma, Lena May would say, I'd get up, dress up, show up, but I'd come home and I would just curl up on the couch and cry, right? It was just day in and day out and day out and day out. But what I realized in that, though, is that after coming out of that, going through that grief, is that I was always searching for happiness, that word happiness. And so I started going to therapy. I started taking an antidepressant at that time as well. But I remember asking my therapist early on, how do I know when I find happiness? And she said to me, you'll know when you get there. And I thought, I'm paying you for this answer? What? Like, what a load of crap. But she's right. Now at 46, is that she's exactly right. Like, that was something that happened to me. It was a life moment, just like my other life moments I talked about earlier. But who am I? What did I learn? This is something that happened in life. I had to grieve through it. I have now 2 beautiful children. I try to be the best mom I can be every day, but I know that it's a tough job. It can be a rewarding job, but I ask both my boys all the time. This is something I pulled from my childhood, is that I'm not perfect. I say this to my kids all the time. I'm not perfect. I'm not going to get it right. Please give me grace just like I want to give you grace. You're going to mess up. That's okay. We can't continue to mess up on the same thing, right? But you're going to mess up. You're going to do something one day that you're just like, ugh, like that probably wasn't the best choice. And there might be a consequence to it. We can't do that forever. And so I think really for my mother, being a mother, my claim to fame with that is that I know I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. And I ask for grace in that conversation, and my son, his freshman year, came out that he is gay. And I remember I knew the conversation was going to come up because we had been talking about, girls and, those sort of things. And I had asked him one day, because we had a pretty open conversation. This is the kind of parent that I'd like to be. It was like, and don't get me wrong, just because I'm open conversation doesn't mean I get the answers that I want or they still talk to me. So please do not misquote me here. But I remember that he said to me, Mom, remember the other day when we were talking about so-and-so and, we talked about, being gay and things like that. And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, there's something I want to tell you. And I thought to myself, he's standing at the kitchen counter. Picture this. I'm standing at my kitchen table and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, he's about to tell me something that's really could be a big life event for him. So Shannon, whatever you do, don't say anything bonehead, because he'll be on that couch in the therapist's office talking about that time I told my mom I was gay and she said something really dumb. Like, I don't think he's going to give me grace at this point, right? And so he tells me, and man, oh man, I was so proud of my kid. Like, first off, when he tells me, he's like, Mom, I'm gay. And I said, okay. And he says, and I say to him, my follow-up question, brilliant. I said, so how do you know? It's the only thing I could think of. And he said, in pure grace and fashion, well, I did some research, because that's clearly my kid if you knew him. And because he was kind of confused of like, well, I've had feelings for girls before, but what I've realized is because I have strong relationships with women, those are more friendships more than a romantic thing. And as he was getting older and teenage, things were changing. Puberty was happening. And he was starting to settle for who he was, right? And this is what I said to him, as I said, I love you. I respect you so much. You are a kid that will march to your own drum and you don't even care who's watching, because that wasn't me. He's definitely the kid that I wasn't. And I love that about him. I really admire him a lot for that. But I said to him, I'm not always going to get this right. I'm going to ask questions you think are foolish, silly, maybe off-putting, maybe, I don't know, but I don't mean those things. I'm curious, right? And so what I ask you is that don't shut me down, talk with me, educate me, lead me. Let's have a conversation, because I'm not going to get this right, but man, I love you. And we have ventured through that, and that's happiness to me, right? Is having those moments where I go, wow, the things I've pulled through life and learned from, that I'm really using them and they're really working. Holy crap. And so now fast forward back to that conversation with that therapist, and she said, when you find happiness, you're going to know. And I was like, yeah, that's just a lame. Yeah, she's just going to take my money and move on. But she was so right, because I can look back to times just like that with Grayson, where happiness, or when I see, I do mentoring with women and they come back and they're like, I never knew I could do whatever it was. And I can say to them, I always knew you could. You just had to get out of your own way. Those are happiness moments, right? You know, when I get to now, like, I've worked really hard in my career, and my son went to college. My son, you know, freshman year, he went off to college, but I still have a young son at home and my husband, but we got to go on a family vacation. And my one girlfriend always says, how do you know when you made it? Right? Because a lot of us in that growing up in the 70s, we didn't have a lot. That was a part of the economy at that time, that you knew people who had it, you know, people who had the first satellite, or remember when your girlfriend got the first VCR or cordless phone, you're like, oh my God, this is so, that's not even going into Guess Jeans or Jordache, but I digress. But you knew you knew the difference growing up. But how did I, you know, when I think about how do I know when I made it, it's not about just what's on the paycheck, or it's not about, for me, a quarterly bonus. Those things are nice, don't get me wrong, but I can just have those moments with my family where we can go together, and the brothers will still fight. Let me not make this into a Hallmark moment that doesn't exist. The brothers still fight. I'm still annoyed by the end of the vacation, and I'm like, is it over yet, right? But I get to have those moments together where we can laugh together, we could argue together, and at the end of the day, we just love each other. And that, to me, Cynthia, is where happiness is coming from. But I had to find it here. You know, it wasn't that I could buy. It wasn't some quick, you know, injection I could take. It really was trying to figure out who I am, who do I represent, right? And who do I want to be? I'm 46. You know, I think this is just the start of many years of watching women grow. So many stories. I think Birdie Mae is going to bring a platform for women to go, I didn't know I could do that. And it's nothing that I'm going to bring them. I'm just setting up the path for them to find success. They're going to do the work. They're going to find their greatness. I'm just here to help them.
And as you were talking, you were pointing, you know, internal to yourself of that's where it had to come from, the happiness, the discovery, the true learning. I wrote down two things, you know, who am I? What do I want? Each sentence, 3 words, 4 words, but so challenging and hard it should be simple, but it's some of us in our 40s.
Yeah.
Thinking we've finally figured it out. I mean, is that, if you were to start people somewhere, is that where you would have them begin? Like, really sit down and think, who am I? What do I want? Who do I want to represent? Is that where you would have people start?
Yeah. Who do I want to be when I grow up? Right? We hear some people like, oh, I want to be when I grow up, even when you're in your 40s or 50s. But that's really it, is that first time is, because people don't know the answer to that. They might have an idea, but when they get down to it and they start to describe it, what they start to describe is everyone else and how everyone else is so dependent on them. Let's take all that away. You peel it all back. When you pull it all back, it's you at the center, and you have to be in charge of who you are. Think about the young you, the teenage you, you know, the young adult you, you know, the sassy 40-year-old us, right? You know, we're bringing sexy back, but
one ice baby at a time.
That's right, girl. But it's such a hard question for women to answer. But I think that we take the time to figure out who we are inside, what helps us tick, what we need, and make sure the people who are around us support who we are. Because that's the biggest thing, is that sometimes we know, but we keep getting pulled back, or we start to feel like we're drowning, right? I had a dream the other night that I was following someone into the water, and this woman said, follow me, you'll be okay. And I remember going in, and I start to go under the water, and I start to panic, and I think, I can't breathe. And all of a sudden she said, yes, you can. And I started breathing. I was breathing underwater. I'm not a mermaid. I'm not trying to tell you that I'm going to transfer into water who I am, but I came back out and I was fine. And after I thought, okay, is that about stress? I feel like I'm underwater. But really what I think that dream was about is, even those times when I feel scared or uncertain, I have to trust. I have to trust that I've built the tribe around me who knows me, who really knows me. The people who knows what I want to do and where I want to go, that I have to trust even myself. and give myself grace. Just like I say to my children and my husband, I might not get it all right. Give me grace. I have to say to little Shannon and 46-year-old Shannon, it's okay. It's okay. We'll get through this.
When people think, great, you just told me this question I need to ask myself, and it may be the hardest question I need to answer. How would you, so let's give them an idea of what, because we fall into the traps of I'm mom, I'm Uber driver, I'm Michael's craft project, whatever extraordinaire. If you were to describe or try to help somebody figure out, okay, if I answer this, what would that look like?
Yeah.
Who is Shannon?
Well, it's so funny. So when we first started this, right, you're like, okay, how do we start you? How do I introduce you, right? And I said, we could start off by saying, well, Shannon Shores, she is now the business development person for, we could have. And it would have been like, all right, informative, educational. And I said to you, this is how I describe myself: a leader, an entrepreneur, and a kind-hearted badass. That's who I am. And there's things that come out of that. That's not a job. I'm not saying I'm the leader of Premier U or I'm the entrepreneur of WellX when I had it. No, those are the things I resonate with of who I am. I'm that leader because I'm okay to speak up for others. I'm the person because I didn't do that as a kid. If something bad happened, I might skirt around it and maybe get a teacher to help. If someone was getting bullied, I might get the teacher to help, and I might not step in and go, that's not right. But I'm that leader now. And that's who I am, because I believe that people, this is not a place for bullying. People need to be lifted up to their full potential. And so I think that's how you don't have to make it complicated. But don't find yourself, if you're sitting down with that notebook and you're finding yourself going, well, yeah, I'm the room mom. Those are jobs. Those are tasks, right? Who are you? What are your ingredients for your happiness? And maybe you don't know that yet, right? So you might have a short list coming up at first, right? That's okay. Because really in time, if you focus on who you really are and you lived your life at figuring out who I really am, who do I need to have in my inner circle, that list will get longer, because you're going to open up your mind of thinking about who you really want to be, and you're going to grow to that. You're going to manifest that. Just like my January calendar said, that got me thinking of, look at the potential, look at the opportunities, and the only person that can get in Shannon's way is Shannon.
Couple that with, a lot of us in our 40s, you probably won't have all these answers in your 20s. In fact, I would challenge most people that even in your 40s, some people may say, it's too late, I'm too old. Wrong.
Just the beginning.
So many really successful people took a while to find their voice and said, I'm not going to give up my voice, no matter how many people are telling me it can't be done that way, or to do it my way, meaning theirs. And there's nothing, I really don't think there's anything in it's too late, or I'm too old, or I'm too far beyond.
Yeah. No. This is the time. It's your time. So what do you want to do with your time? Do you want to make the best of it? Or are you going to let time pass you by? And I'm going to tell you now, I'm not going to let time pass me by. And I want to surround myself with people who are just like that, who see each day as an opportunity to do something more, better. Because, we live in an environment where you hear a lot of negativity, or people who are just bad spots and they're just not getting out, of where they are. I don't want to be that person, because that's that internal happiness. I'm never going to be happy like that. So it's never too late. Today's the day. If you're hearing this podcast and you're thinking, holy crap, you mean I could turn this around? I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next day, right? This is years. This is 46 years, as I put in that thing of finding happiness, right? But that's okay. You got to start somewhere. So start today when you hear this. Get yourself your little notebook. Write down those 2 questions. Who am I and what do I want to be? And just put it out there. Make yourself a plan. Manifest it. You're the only one who can get in your way.
Gosh, this is going to be a perfect way to kind of close it out. I will say, whether it's Shannon or you have friends around you,
yes,
that is one great place to say, how would you describe me? When I seem to be at my happy state, what am I doing? Who am I being? So if you need help, it could be those around you, pick the right ones to ask, who are going to go in that positive way. Or it could be reaching out to someone like a Shannon to make you really face and not escape those difficult questions that it may take time to get over, but I feel like once you do, there's going to be a freedom and a more happy state that you're going to feel.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming and sharing so much stuff. I keep thinking, like, where can I write more stuff? I can't wait for this to be released. If people want to find you, whether it's Birdie Mae or Channel 2 and all those places that you're sharing the story about health for everybody in general, especially women's health that maybe has been underserved, how does everyone find you?
So Birdie Mae is going to launch in October. So there'll be lots of things you may see. But the best place for you to find me right now is on LinkedIn, Shannon Shores. You'll see all the many hats. You'll actually see those little blips on my resume as well that, hey, I'm loving, because that is a part of who I am and what I learned. So find me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. I'd love to hear what you think about this podcast, good, bad, or indifferent, because feedback is good as well. But I would love to hear how this impacted you, if it did. And that's where you can find me.
You may see one of her interesting, funny posts and just decide to reach out and then make a new friend. So put yourself out there to whatever may come your way. And as I mentioned earlier, if there's anything you got from this, or anyone you know who could learn from this or any of the other episodes, like, share, follow Shannon on LinkedIn or anywhere else. And again, thank you for the fun conversation, the energy, the lots of things to learn from. So thanks for rocking out to the music this morning.
That's right.
Coming on in no matter what.
Well, thanks for the invite. This has been great, Cynthia.
Thank you.
This concludes another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. To hear more episodes of the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our mission of helping women reach higher levels of success, visit sheliftproject.com and sign up to receive the latest news, ebooks, videos, and more.